It was 8:47 on a November evening in Seattle, and rain ticked against my window in soft rhythm, the kind that usually settles my nerves after a long day in South Lake Union spreadsheets and compliance calls. But tonight, the air felt too still, like the city was holding its breath with me as I finished reconciling my own monthly budget. A ritual I treated like prayer kettle steaming beside me, screens glowing, the faint hum of the dishwasher grounding me in the quiet life I built far from Tacoma. Then my phone lit up. One message. 14 words. "You are banned from Thanksgiving, idiot." I stared at it for a second. Not shocked, not wounded in any sharp way. Just hollow in the way truth settles when you have been waiting for it to finally stop pretending to be love. My breath did not spike. My body did not tremble. I simply felt a click inside my chest, a subtle shift like a lock turning after years of pressure. I looked back at my spreadsheet, column labeled Family Support. Subscript Autopay. Line items in clinical neat order, each one a story they never thanked me for. Puget Sound Energy. Xfinity Internet. Car insurance. Cell plan 5 lines. Supplemental medical card. Monthly emergency transfer. I scrolled. The numbers read like a confession they never intended to make. 10 years. 10 years of being the responsible one, the quiet one, the daughter who made it out and then chained herself back by the wallet, because survival once came with a price tag disguised as loyalty. My tea cooled, steam thinned, my chest stayed still. Not angry, not grieving, just done. I clicked open the Puget Sound account. Cursor hovered over Remove Payment Method. My pulse did not change. Click. Xfinity, click. Insurance portal, authentication. Remove saved card. Click. Cell plan. Advanced settings. Remove secondary approval. Account owner toggle. Click. Savings transfer. Two-factor code. Confirm. Click. I watched each confirmation box appear like small silent detonations, polite corporate statements saying, "You do not own this person anymore." Outside, rain streaked the glass, like the city was moving on without wiping tears for anyone. I thought of my mother typing that message, imagining she had power because she had hurt me before, and saw me kneel to earn my way back, not knowing that compliance only lasts until dignity wakes up. Idiot. The word lingered not as insult, but as a monument to their blindness. They believed money meant control. They thought generosity was a leash. They forgot I was the one holding the accounts. Midnight crept forward in the reflections of downtown lights across Elliott Bay. My apartment felt clean, like oxygen finally had room to move. The cursor blinked at me, and I blinked back steady. One last payment method. Mortgage autopay for the house that was never mine for the roof they bragged about maintaining while I quietly carried it to keep them from collapsing under their own pride. Remove authorization. Confirm. Done. I sat back in my chair and listened. Not to noise, but to the absence of it, the way silence can feel like strength when you have been muted too long. I imagined the first flicker at their house when the heat clicked off. The still router lights. The sudden realization that convenience has a heartbeat, and that heartbeat lived here with me this whole time. I did not imagine their panic with pleasure. I am not cruel. I just knew the truth was finally finding them, and truth can be far harsher than any child could ever be. My phone buzzed once. I did not check it. I closed my laptop with a calm so complete it almost scared me, except it did not. It felt earned. It felt precise. It felt like waking up after a long sleep where someone whispered you owe us while you were dreaming and you believed it because they were the first voices you ever heard. Not anymore. I walked to the window. Seattle shimmered indifferent, beautiful, alive. For the first time in years, I felt like I was part of it rather than anchored to a past that devoured my present. Tomorrow, they would feel the first sting. By morning, the world they built on my back would wobble. By the weekend, it would fall. Not because I pushed it, but because they never learned how to stand without leaning on the daughter they underestimated. I touched my phone only to silence notifications. No rush. No panic. No reply. Let the world they built call me. Let it ring. Tonight was not about revenge. It was about release. The first breath of freedom does not roar, it whispers, and mine sounded like a quiet sentence forming in my mind. I am done. My name is Avery Carter, and I am 29 years old, which in Seattle can sometimes feel older than it sounds, maybe because this city teaches you to grow up fast, if you want to afford to breathe here. I work as a senior financial operations analyst in a glass building near South Lake Union, where the elevators move silently and the floor badges buzz with that quiet kind of authority people pretend not to notice. Most mornings, I walk by coffee shops full of tech workers in fleece jackets, earbuds, and eyes on dashboards and spreadsheets, and I blend right in. Because in many ways, I am exactly that someone who organizes chaos through numbers and believes systems do not lie, even when people do. After work, I go home to an apartment that feels like it understands me better than most humans ever tried to. It is small, but high enough that I can see the water and the ferries cutting through dusk, and it is clean. Not in the way of perfection, but in the way of intention. A sofa I saved for. A bookshelf lined with quiet stories and productivity manuals. Potted plants that I water on schedule because discipline is a form of care when emotion has failed you enough times. Soft light. A throw blanket that knows every version of tired I bring through the door. Everything in its place because order became survival long before I moved here. I grew up in Tacoma, a city with grit and heart where people talk louder, laugh louder, regret louder too. My childhood was not loud in warmth, but loud in expectation. My father was the kind of man who loved in gestures that always came with strings. Not cruel, but inconsistent. A person who could be charming in public and sulking at home, who could say I am proud of you and then follow it with but do not forget who helped you. He taught guilt the way some fathers teach baseball, tossing it again and again until you learned to catch without flinching. My mother was different, soft-voiced and sharp-eyed, someone who prayed loudly in church and whispered judgment quietly in the kitchen, someone who believed being right was holier than being kind. She had a smile neighbors praised and a tone that could slice through bone when the doors closed. Growing up with that kind of contradiction shapes you in ways therapy later unpacks but never fully unthreads. And then there was Blake, my cousin the golden one, the boy who never met responsibility without handing it to someone else. He was the charming troublemaker in school, the one adults excused and girls adored the family pride even when he contributed nothing but confidence. He called himself a sales professional, but mostly floated between temporary jobs, always talking big numbers he never actually earned. Family praised him for potential while quietly handing him bills and excuses. I learned spreadsheets before I learned boundaries, and I learned how to stretch money before I learned how to stretch kindness toward myself. In college, while Blake drifted from one idea to another, I worked campus jobs, interned, studied calculated loan interest curves on Friday nights because fear of debt felt heavier than fear of missing out. Numbers were fair. They told truths without guilt. They rewarded effort without emotional toll. They held me when people did not. By the time I graduated, I knew how to model cash flow scenarios and forecast failure before it arrived. And somewhere along the way, I became the person everyone in my family asked for help. Advice funds, access reassurance, a soft landing disguised as a daughter. No one ever asked if I wanted to be that. They assumed I owed it. They assumed growing up meant giving back, not in affection, but in finance. You are good with money, my mother would say, as if it were a blessing and not a lifelong assignment she never intended to release me from. Work became my refuge, my calendar filled with budget cycles, quarterly close reviews, reconciliation sprints, the kind of mental focus that keeps you from drowning in family obligations disguised as loyalty. I liked the precision. I liked the clarity. I liked knowing that if I put in the inputs, I could predict the outputs. People rarely offer that kind of logic. At home, surrounded by plants that grow when watered and shelves that stay where I place them, I felt safe maybe for the first time in my life. But safety, I learned, is fragile when tied to people who see you not as a person, but as a resource. For years, I answered calls about overdue statements, credit card declines, bill due dates, convincing myself this was love, this was what daughters do, even as the weight pressed deeper and deeper. People say family is forever, but what they never mention is how forever can feel like a sentence when duty replaces affection. I did not realize I was slowly financing my own erasure until one quiet November night when a message made it obvious. I was not included. I was expected, useful until I set a boundary. My life in Seattle was proof that I could stand alone. What followed would prove whether I would choose to. People like to say patterns only make sense in hindsight, but I think deep down we always feel them forming long before we know how to name them. My pattern began when I was 19. I had just started community college working 20 hours a week at a bookstore and living off microwaved rice bowls and cheap coffee. My mother sat beside me at the kitchen table one afternoon, her voice soft in that practiced wounded way she used whenever she wanted something. "We should open a credit card for emergencies," she said, like it was care, not strategy. "It will build your credit." "We are just thinking of your future," I signed. I believed her. Months later, the first emergency was her car battery, then groceries, then Blake needed gas money because he was driving to an interview he never got. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself family helps family the way other kids told themselves they were lucky. At 22, my car broke down on the highway. My mother called it unfortunate timing. My father called it adulthood. The mechanic called it $2,000. They promised they would pay me back once the tax return came in. I put it on that same credit card because what else could I do? Every week, I checked my banking app like a child waiting by a window looking for headlights that never came. The tax return did come. Blake posted a picture from Cabo that same month. My parents never mentioned the debt again. At 23, when my dad lost his job, I was already working in Seattle, commuting 90 minutes each morning in a car held together by hope and duct tape. Dad called, whispering like shame had teeth. "Just until I get back on my feet. The mortgage is due and your mother is beside herself." I was 23 and still learning to breathe under expectations I never agreed to carry. I set up the auto payment and told myself it was temporary. Months turned into a year. They kept their house. I paid for it. I moved into a tiny studio and learned to stretch rice another day. My mother praised my maturity to church friends while buying Blake a new suit for a networking event. She said I was blessed with stability as if stability was a gift and not sacrifice. At 24, she cried in a parking lot outside a T-Mobile store saying she just did not understand these plans and her phone kept shutting off. I was embarrassed, then concerned, then trapped when she suggested we put everyone on one plan because you have the best credit, dear. 5 lines. My phone, their phones, Blake's tablet because he needed it for work apparently. I did not realize then that need was a word my family applied only to themselves. The next day, she posted a Bible quote about generous daughters on Facebook. I bought myself a $5 latte to feel something like comfort. At 27, Blake launched his startup, a logistics idea he called revolutionary. He said, family invests in family. He said it was temporary help. He said I would double my money. What I gave was not an investment. It was rent groceries, power bills flying out of my account disguised as support. He posted motivational quotes about hustle culture while I sat alone on my couch staring at a checking balance that made my stomach clench. At 28, Dad had a health scare, and I rushed to the ER, heart racing, hands cold. Hospital lights hum differently when you are holding fear in your throat. The receptionist mentioned the bill, and my mother inhaled sharply as if the air itself betrayed her. "Avery can cover it," she said, without looking at me like it was an obvious truth, not a request. "Family helps family," she whispered, but it wasn't a whisper. It was an order wearing the costume of love. I paid. Of course I paid. And then came the aftermath. Not gratitude, but expectation. "You are doing better than us," they said. "You do not need kids, we need support." They joked, laughing in a way that was not laughter. "Stop acting superior," my mother hissed once when I asked Blake to pay back even a small part. Their tone always carried the same undertone: you owe us. We raised you. We made you. I did not understand then that debt was emotional only on my side. For them, it was transactional. Kindness became obligation. Obligation became guilt. Guilt became entitlement, and entitlement calcified into a family culture so normal, I nearly mistook it for loyalty. 10 years of quiet giving. 10 years of swallowing disappointment like vitamins. 10 years of believing I was doing the right thing when really I was just slowly dissolving into someone they could use without resistance. The tragedy of it was not that I helped. Helping is kindness. The tragedy was that they knew I would never stop unless they pushed too far. And one November evening, with a single message, they finally did. There is a particular kind of clarity that arrives not with anger, but with exhaustion. It is the moment you stop excusing what you already know. Mine came on a gray Tuesday morning, the kind Seattle specializes in, where the sky feels like wet concrete and even the air hangs heavy. I sat at my desk at home, coffee cooling untouched beside me, eyes locked on my bank screen. I had opened it because I wanted to feel control. Instead, I found truth. The line items were familiar until they were not. Phone bill, power bill, mortgage payment, recurring grocery transfers to my mother's account I never remembered approving. Then something new. An Apple charge I did not recognize at first glance. I thought it was my iCloud bill, but the amount was wrong. Higher. Far higher. I clicked details. It showed a device purchase tied to my account. Not my phone, not my laptop. A separate device registered under a nickname I had never chosen. One that read, Blake iPad Pro. A quiet wave rolled through my chest. Not shock. Recognition. A pattern resurfacing like oil through water. I had paid for another thing without knowing. He had helped himself again. Later that week, when I visited my parents under the pretense of bringing soup because Mom posted she was sick, I noticed something else. A box in the garage. Industrial equipment tucked between Christmas bins and old chairs. A UPS shipping label addressed to my name, ordered to my parents' house. Weld equipment. Blake had mentioned once in passing about a side project. Something about custom bike frames. I had nodded, thinking it was a hobby, but there it sat, connected to a power outlet, humming faintly. My father hovered nearby, as though guarding it. When I asked if Blake was expanding his business, Dad shrugged and muttered, "Just helping. You know you are blessed to support that boy." I walked out that night with a headache that felt too familiar. Later, I saw photos on his Instagram story, him showing off a frame he claimed he built in his luxury apartment. But the equipment was in my parents' garage, powered by my payments. There is a special sting in realizing someone has not only taken advantage of your generosity, but used your resources to build their illusion of independence. Still, that was not the worst discovery. The worst came from data. Data is honest. It does not perform. It does not flatter. It reveals. I logged into the shared phone plan portal one quiet evening, telling myself I was simply checking usage. I clicked on the iPad Pro line. It had burned through data like a furnace, and the logs were instructive. Daily spikes from 9 to 5. Consistent. Professional hours. Locations I checked: IP data maps. Downtown luxury fitness club. His apartment complex lobby. A high-end co-working space on Pike Street. He had been using my data to run his work life. Not carefully, not occasionally, daily. He never asked. He felt entitled. I stared at the screen and whispered the truth out loud for the first time. He does not need help. He expects it. That realization hurt because it proved the part of me that wanted to believe they simply struggled was naive. They were not drowning. They were reclining, using my oxygen while laughing at how dramatic I was for occasionally gasping for breath. Then there were the church posts. My mother dressed in her best pastel cardigan at Sunday service, smiling with my father in a pew. Bible verses about blessings and family and God's provision under photos staged like she had her own Hallmark movie. Captions like, "God provides for his faithful and grateful for family support." Every time I saw those posts, heat rose in my face. Not because of faith. Faith was never the problem. Performance was. They were praising divine blessing while quietly draining my paycheck like a holy siphon. God did not provide. I did. And they replaced him with my paycheck. The hypocrisy scraped like sandpaper inside my ribs. I grew up believing faith meant humility, sincerity, kindness. But at home, righteousness was costume jewelry, shine in public, cut in private, their voices from years ago replayed in my head. You owe us. We raised you. You do not understand real sacrifice. You think you are better because you went to college. You do not need children. We need support. It was always obligation dressed as love, love with conditions, love with invoices and fine print. While they prayed for blessings, I worked for them. While they bowed heads on Sunday, I bent mine over spreadsheets on Monday to stretch money far enough to keep us all afloat. Except they never knew the floating came from me. They believed it came from God. Convenient faith, convenient daughter. One day in the break room at work, while everyone talked about holiday flights and cozy family traditions, someone asked if I was excited to go home for Thanksgiving. That question hit harder than it should have. I smiled at that polite, automatic reaction women learn to deploy like armor and said, "Yes, of course, looking forward to family time." But inside, my stomach tightened. I wanted what they had, not the money, the assumption, the default safety, the ability to step back into childhood warmth instead of adult obligation. I washed my mug in the sink that afternoon and stared at my reflection in the chrome faucet. I looked like someone who appeared fine, stable, successful. But stability paid for under duress is not stability. It is captivity dressed in competence. They say when someone shows you who they are, believe them. But what do you do when they never say it out loud? They just quietly take and expect you to stay grateful. I once thought I was helping my family survive. Then I realized I was helping them avoid growth. They never had to change because I absorbed every consequence. Quietly, efficiently, like a financial IV drip. When you are useful, they never ask if you are tired. They only ask why you paused. I thought loyalty meant loyalty to them. It did not occur to me loyalty could also mean loyalty to myself. All those years I prayed for peace, not understanding peace, cannot exist where exploitation lives. And still, I stayed convincing myself endurance was love, but love does not drain. Love refills. It took one text to show me they never intended to refill me. They only intended to refill from me. That was the moment I stopped being their resource and started becoming my own boundary. And once I saw the truth, I could not unsee it. 3 days before Thanksgiving, my phone buzzed with the familiar family group chat tone, the one I never muted, because a small part of me still held hope that one day those notifications might mean connection instead of duty. I was at my kitchen counter stirring pasta, half listening to jazz, half watching steam curl above the pot. The message preview showed a photo. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened it. A seating chart, long dining table, handwritten names at each spot like a magazine spread, leaves and tiny pumpkins. My mother loved props. Every name was there. Aunts, uncles, Blake in bold cursive like he was being honored. Even a new girlfriend of his I had not met. My name was not on the table. I zoomed in thinking maybe it was cropped. Maybe I missed it. No, it was simply not there. My chest tightened in the way soft hurt arrives, not sharp but bruising. I typed light tone polite the way peacekeepers do when they still want to believe in harmony. Looks beautiful. Just checking did I miss my spot. The 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, my mother replied, "You need to focus on work and your attitude. This year is about peace. We don't want tension." I stared at the words. Peace. The irony almost made me laugh. I typed again, steady fingers despite the rising pulse. "I have never brought tension. I just want to know if I am invited." Another pause. Blake chimed in with a thumbs up emoji like he was approving her message. Then he wrote, "Just be good." Maybe Christmas. I felt heat bloom under my skin. Not rage. Shame. The old kind. The child version of me who worked so hard to never be a problem. I typed, "What does be good mean?" He sent a laughing emoji. My mother sent a heart. Then she added, "Don't make this dramatic. You always take things personally. It's a holiday, not a therapy session." I stared at the screen. I could feel the sting behind my eyes, but tears did not come. Something else did. A memory of every time I swallowed feelings to keep the peace. Of every bill I paid quietly so they would not struggle. Of every time they thanked God instead of me. Of every sacrifice treated like obligation. I put the phone down and tried to focus on dinner. The pasta boiled over instead. Steam hissed. It smelled like frustration. A minute later, a voice memo came through from my mother. Her tone was sweet like church choir sugar. Avery, you are making this so hard. We want a nice holiday. No negativity. And stop acting like the money police. Family is not about transactions. My breath caught because the hypocrisy was so heavy it felt like a weight. Family is not about transactions. That line could have knocked the wind out of me if I had not already been running on fumes from a decade of silent transactions she never acknowledged. I replayed her message once, twice. On the third time, it felt surreal, like listening to someone decorate cruelty in velvet. Then came the uncle voice. He always loved to insert himself the family comedian who never read rooms. He wrote, heard the IRS is calling better behave, Avery winking emoji. Laughter emojis followed. Laughter. Over me. Over the daughter who paid their mortgage and their health bills and their internet, they streamed football on. I sat perfectly still. In that stillness, something dissolved. Shame evaporated and steel formed in its place. I was not embarrassed anymore. I was awake. It hit me like a quiet revelation. They do not love me more because I help. They do not love me less when I stop. They do not measure love at all. They measure access. My phone lit again. Blake wrote, chill. You get so sensitive. Holidays are fun when you don't overreact. Overreact. That word has been used against women for generations to silence instincts, to undermine truth, to gaslight reality. I was not overreacting. I was finally reacting. Then the sound that sealed it. Background laughter, faint but distinct through another voice memo my mother sent while multitasking, forgetting to mute. Someone asked, "What did she say?" And my mother's voice, light and amused, replied, "Oh, you know her. She thinks she is in charge of everything." More laughter. Muffling. Then a distant clink of glasses. Light, careless, cruel. It sliced sharper than yelling ever could. Because indifference is the purest form of contempt. I set my phone down slowly as if any sudden movement might break the thin layer of patience left inside me. Shame flooded first. The old reflex. Then heat spread up my neck. Then something incredible happened. The heat cooled. A calm settled. A clarity so still it felt holy. I whispered to the quiet room, I am done financing people who mock me. The words did not crack. They did not tremble. They landed like truth finally allowed to take shape. A lifetime of trying to earn a seat at a table built on my labor and my silence. And here they were celebrating my absence like a favor to themselves. They thought exclusion was punishment. They did not know it was freedom disguised as insult. I picked up my phone again. Not to respond. To remember. To let the moment burn into me so deeply that I would never gaslight myself again into believing loyalty means self-abandonment. I read the thread one more time. I saw every micro wound, every joke at my expense, every half-smile emoji, every subtle implication that I needed to prove my worth. Except my worth was no longer up for debate. Not by them, not by anyone. I put the phone face down and turned off the stove. The room felt heavier and lighter at once. My chest ached and opened. My heart did not break. It rebooted. 3 days before Thanksgiving, they made a table without me. They did not know I was about to remove myself from the entire system that kept their world running. They thought they excluded me. They did not realize I was the one about to walk away. The difference between being pushed out and choosing to leave is everything. That night, the rain tapped my window again, but it no longer sounded like comfort. It sounded like transition, like something quietly ending so something stronger could begin. I was not being rejected. I was being released. And I was the one holding the scissors. The night after the group chat, I did not cry. I thought I might. I thought the ache would spill out in shaking breaths and messy grief, but instead I felt something colder, cleaner, like a winter morning when the air bites but it wakes you up. I sat at my desk with the lamp casting a steady golden circle over the wood, and I opened a new document. Title Family Disengagement Plan. Subtitle: Effective immediately. I formatted it the way I might structure a corporate separation file, bullet points, and timeline steps because this was not emotion anymore. This was procedure. I pulled a 3-ring binder from my cabinet, one I had bought months ago with the vague idea of organizing tax records. I labeled the spine in neat black ink exit strategy. It felt absurd for a second, dramatic almost. Then I remembered the laughter in that voice memo, and absurdity disappeared. I filled the first page with a checklist. Assess all financial ties, freeze credit, separate accounts, remove autopay, change passwords, update beneficiaries, secure documents, protect identity, print confirmations, file proof. I wrote each line slowly mechanically, the way surgeons prep instruments before an incision. Not rushed, not angry, focused. A different kind of precision than spreadsheets. Personal. Necessary. I turned to my laptop and opened the 3 major credit bureaus, Experian first, then Equifax, then TransUnion. I navigated to the freeze sections and paused for a breath that felt like closing a door. Freeze. 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 Confirmation emails pinged softly. Identity secured. Gate locked. The first real boundary I had set in years. Not emotional. Practical. A firewall. Next, I opened my bank dashboard. I had accounts at one of the big national banks, convenient but exposed. I created a transfer to move my savings to a credit union known for stricter protocols and high-level authentication. I set up new security keys and a new PIN. Then I opened a second secure online bank and shifted a portion there too, divided like strategic reserves across vaults. Redundancy. Risk mitigation. The kind of planning I taught junior analysts at work. Except this time the stakes were not quarterly forecasts, but my life. On my desk, I added a printed checklist to the binder bank migration. Complete. Then came the more invasive surgery. The phone plan. I logged into the portal. 5 lines. My number. My parents' phones. Blake's tablet. And apparently a smartwatch I had not known existed registered under my mother's name, but billed to me. My jaw tightened, but my pulse did not rise. I clicked through advanced settings, removed my stored card, and initiated a planned separation. The system warned me that the other lines would need to re-establish their own payment method to avoid service interruption. I stared at that sentence. To avoid service interruption. Funny how gentle corporate language can sound when it really means prepare for impact. I printed the confirmation and slid it into a clear sleeve. Then utilities, Puget Sound Energy, remove autopay, confirm, Xfinity, remove saved card, confirm, gas company, remove authorization, confirm, water bill portal, remove card, confirm. I knew they would receive emails. I did not check my phone. I was not doing this to hurt them. I was doing this to stop hurting myself. Next, I checked credit card accounts. 1 primary, 1 secondary card I had once opened to help my mother establish points and travel benefits she never used. I clicked Remove Authorized User. Confirmed. Closed the secondary card entirely. It felt like cutting an IV line that had been quietly draining me for years. I added the printouts to the binder in order, labeling each tab with neat handwriting: banking, phone, utilities, credit. Every click felt like reclaiming oxygen. Every confirmation felt like a key turning in a lock that had been rusted shut. In another tab, I printed transaction histories, highlighted recurring transfers disguised as one-offs, annotated charges I had ignored in the name of peace. Seeing them physically ink on paper made the truth immovable. I slid them into pockets like evidence in a courtroom only I could see. Then I created a new section labeled Contingencies. I wrote emergency numbers for my bank fraud hotlines, a list of passwords handwritten once, and stored in a sealed envelope. Not paranoid. Prepared. When you grow up with emotional volatility disguised as family, love, you learn, preparation is survival. I thought briefly about sending a message to explain what I was doing. Something graceful. Something diplomatic. Then I remembered my mother's voice saying, "Stop acting like the money police and Blake telling me to be good, like I was a misbehaving child." No explanation was required. They did not give me explanations when they took. Silence was dignity. I printed one more document, a simple budget for myself. Rent, utilities, savings, groceries. A category labeled Joy Small but Present because life needed sweetness too. I placed it at the front of the binder. A statement not of rebellion but of rebirth. Then I opened a small fireproof box where I kept my passport and social security card, and I added the binder to the bottom, heavy enough now to feel like a shield. In the quiet hum of my apartment, I could have felt lonely. Instead, I felt accompanied by something I had ignored too long, my own authority. When I finished, I turned off the desk lamp and the room fell into calm shadow. I stood there for a moment, absorbing the stillness. A different silence than the one after the group chat. That silence felt like rejection. This one felt like ownership. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself water, and leaned against the counter. If someone had looked through the window, they might have seen a woman simply standing there, calm, tired, ordinary. They would not see the war I refused to fight anymore because the fight was not mine. The battlefield had never been mine. I was just the supply line. No more. From now on, my effort would build my life, not maintain a world that mocked me behind closed doors and praised God for my labor. There are moments in life when you realize the only way to keep your heart intact is to stop handing it to people who believe it is collateral. I had spent years believing I was doing what good daughters do. That night, I chose to do what self-respecting adults do: prepare, protect, proceed. In the binder at the end of my separation checklist, I wrote a final line in small, steady ink. This is not punishment. This is permission. And for the first time, I felt like it belonged to me. Thanksgiving morning arrived quiet, the kind of cold blue dawn that feels almost fragile. Seattle wakes slowly on holidays, as if the entire city surrenders to stillness, before families gather, before ovens hum, before laughter and clinking dishes drown out reflection. I woke before my alarm, not from anxiety, but from certainty. Today was not a holiday for me. It was a transition. I brewed chamomile instead of coffee because I wanted calm, not fuel. I watched the steam curl like breath in winter air and stood at my window overlooking Elliott Bay as ferries moved silently across the gray water. The world was starting fresh. So was I. 7:02 a.m. I opened my laptop, binder beside me, pen ready. This would be procedural step by step without hesitation. I started with Puget Sound Energy. The login screen flashed. I entered credentials. The account dashboard loaded. There it was, a green check mark next to auto payment active. Payment method: my card. Invoice history: steady monthly withdrawals. I clicked Manage Payment, then Remove. The system asked if I was sure. Yes. Confirmation success. The page refreshed and the circle turned gray. Not active. A decade of responsibility erased with one quiet click. Next tab. Gas account. Same ritual. Remove card. Confirm. A small notification window popped up reminding me that service could be disrupted without payment. A reasonable warning. I closed it. Responsibility now shifted to its rightful owner. 7:46 a.m. I logged into Xfinity. Their portal always felt overly cheerful, bright icons, curated offers. On any other day, I might have found the tone ironic. Today, I felt nothing but precision. Remove payment. Confirm. Another tiny pop-up. Your next billing cycle will require a valid method of payment. A factual sentence, not a threat. Consequences are not cruelty. They are clarity. 8:11 a.m. I dialed the gas card customer support line. A polite automated voice asked if I wanted to report a lost card or close the account. Close. The representative sounded cheerful, unaware she was assisting a liberation. I verified identity. She thanked me for my loyalty. It struck me because my family had never thanked me with sincerity. Companies do it out of obligation, but at least they say it. Card closed, binder updated. 9:02 a.m. I opened the phone carrier account. This step required more layers. I navigated to account management. A notice appeared. Separate lines. It explained each line holder will need to confirm identity in store to continue service. I breathed slowly. Yes, Continue. A second confirmation screen. Are you sure? Yes. It was unsettling how formal the phrasing sounded, as if the system sensed the weight of my choice. Or maybe I was just assigning meaning to simple code. Either way, my finger did not tremble. This step was irreversible, and that was the point. If they wanted service, they would have to face it. Face adulthood. Face independence. Face reality. And reality was overdue. 10 to 33 a.m. I adjusted passwords across accounts, adding two-factor authentication, new PINs, updated security questions. I sealed written versions in the fireproof box. Dry ritual, practical protection, stability earned, not given. 11:58 a.m. I paused only when I reached the mortgage autopay entry. This one carried weight because of history, not hesitance. Years of quiet payments. Years of enabling them to stay in a house they took pride in not acknowledging who held their walls upright. My cursor hovered. Remove. A confirmation box appeared. Your automatic payment has been canceled. I stared at that sentence. It looked like a software message. It felt like emancipation. 12:14 p.m. My phone buzzed once. Unknown number. I set it face down. I was not answering today. My role was no longer responder. 12:32 p.m. I walked into the kitchen, reheated my tea, and took a slow sip. The world outside was brightening, faint sunlight cutting through clouds. I breathed in warmth and quiet. For the first time in years, silence did not feel like waiting. It felt like possession. 1:07 p.m. The first real tremor arrived. A text. Dad. Did the bank call you? Something weird happening here. I did not respond. The second text followed by a call. Mom, internet stopped. Did you change something? Then another. Blake. My tablet locked up mid-client call. This is not funny. Phone vibrated again. Dad Power Company email. Something is wrong. I placed my phone screen down. Their urgency was not mine. Their panic was not my burden. Responsibility returning to its rightful source. 2:43 p.m. Missed calls 11. I sat cross-legged on my couch with a blanket draped over my lap, reading a book about boundaries. I smiled at the coincidence. Boundaries are not punishment. They are architecture. 3:57 p.m. Another call. Then 5 more. Voicemails stacked. Messages lined up like dominoes tipping. Mom, call me right now. Blake. Are you kidding me? Dad, we need to talk. Mom again. This is childish Avery. 4:20 p.m. 5th voicemail from Mom. Your father is upset. Why would you do this today? It is Thanksgiving. We invited Pastor to dinner. You are embarrassing us. That sentence landed with familiar weight, the old script. You are wrong for disrupting our image, but the difference now was that I recognized the language. It was not love, it was control. Influence disguised as disappointment. The voice of someone who assumed my role was cushion insurance, silent support. 4:46 p.m. More missed calls. My notifications climbed like a stock chart, hitting volatility. 21, 27, 34. I muted the phone, not in anger, but in peace. 5:35 p.m. A voicemail from Blake. He sounded strained. I do not know what is going on, but fix it. I have an important week coming up. The entitlement felt almost surreal. He never said please. He never acknowledged what I had done before. He demanded. Default inheritance of privilege without contribution. 6:02 p.m. I heated soup, sat at my table, and ate slowly. Outside, lights flickered on across the city, warm windows glowing. Somewhere kitchens bustled with family chatter and holiday noise. Mine was quiet, and yet I felt more held by this stillness than by any Thanksgiving table I had ever sat at. 7:18 p.m. Voicemail from Dad. We cannot access the mortgage account. Something is wrong. Did you change permission? Call back. The thing about independence is this: when you have spent your life leaning on someone, you forget how legs work. 7:33 p.m. A knock at my door. I froze at first, not in fear, but in disbelief. They would not come here. They valued presentation too much. They would not confront publicly. I looked through the peephole. Delivery. A neighbor down the hall taking in packages for the building. He waved. I exhaled. The knock was not them. Crisis avoided. Not emergency. Just my heart adjusting to a new world. 7:56 p.m. My phone pinged again. A text from Mom, internet down. Power shut off. Heater not working. What on earth happened? You did something. Call now. Followed by another. This is on you. Then. Do not ruin Thanksgiving. Even now the priority was not safety, but image. 8:24 p.m. Missed calls 52. I put my mug to my lips and drank another long sip of chamomile. It tasted like self-respect. 9:01 p.m. Group text message sent by Dad. You went too far. I read it twice. Too far. Interesting phrase. People rarely complain about distance until they feel the absence of what they used to take for granted. 9:37 p.m. Blake again. My gym Wi-Fi expired, so I have been using the tablet data. It cut off mid-call. I looked ridiculous. Fix it. I laughed quietly. Soft, almost sad, almost free. Accountability always feels like attack to those who rely on immunity. 10:12 p.m. Voicemail. Mom's tone shaking now under the performance. Call us right now. This is cruel. Your father is freezing. You have responsibilities. Responsibilities, not relationship, not kindness, not respect. Duties, my former job title in that family. Unpaid emotional and financial labor disguised as love. 10:58 p.m. My apartment stayed warm. Lights golden, curtains drawn. Outside, the sky turned ink. I stretched my legs and felt muscles unclench. I did not know had been tight. 11:27 p.m. Missed calls, 87. Not a dramatic number, an honest one, a decade of unset expectations landing back where they belonged. 11:40 p.m. I walked to the window again. The Space Needle glimmered in the distance, quiet but unmistakable, like a lighthouse for people who carve out lives alone and learn to call the solitude strength instead of failure. I whispered to the glass, not as declaration, but as truth. I did not turn off the lights. I turned on accountability. Midnight. I placed my phone face down one last time and closed my eyes. Outside, the city hummed indifferent to one family's unraveling. And inside, I felt something settle so deeply that it almost hummed too. I was not cruel. I was done. And being done had never felt so powerfully, unbelievably calm. Morning slid in without ceremony. Gray light filtering across my living room floor like a quiet witness. I had slept surprisingly deeply, as if my body finally trusted the world to hold itself up without me. The phone face down on the table felt like a live wire waiting to be touched. I turned it over. 47 notifications, texts, missed calls, voicemails, family group chat lighting up with frantic energy. I scrolled through, slowly, not rushing, as though reading the headlines of a life I no longer belonged to. Mom. This is unbelievable. Call us. Dad, heat still off. Blake. I had to leave the gym mid-workout because the tablet shut down again. Fix this. Mom again. Your father is shivering. Your grandmother would be ashamed of you. I paused on that one. Grandmother. The patron saint of obligation. The woman who once told me you are the smart one, so God expects more from you. Expectations always translated into sacrifice. I kept reading. Mom. We saved you a plate like you always wanted. Come eat and we will talk. The idea that a plate could erase years of imbalance almost made me laugh, but the sound died before it reached my throat. Dad. We trusted you with the bills. You betrayed us. Blake. This is petty. Seriously. Grow up. Then the escalation. Mom. You are ungrateful. After everything we did. Dad. You shame us. Blake. This is not what family does. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, then stopped. Responding was participation, and I was not participating anymore. Another string of texts arrived rapid fire. Mom, I am crying. Are you proud of yourself? Dad, how could you choose today of all days? Blake, we need you. That one sat on my screen longer. We need you. Not we love you. Not we miss you. Need. As if I were a resource, not a person. My phone rang again. I let it vibrate. The voicemail that followed was from my father, voice tight, strained. Avery, come home and fix this. You are being dramatic. We are cold. Then a muttered line, barely audible but clear enough. She always thinks she's better than us. There it was. The truth they never said out loud but always lived by. My success was not pride to them, it was threat. My boundaries were not protection, they were disrespect. And my withdrawal was not self-preservation, it was betrayal. My chest felt warm, not with hurt, but with recognition. I tapped my phone and went to the group chat settings. Mute. I moved to my mother's individual chat. Mute. Father. Mute. Blake. Mute. One by one, I silenced them like extinguishing candles in a room that had never truly been lit for me anyway. The peace was immediate, a stillness that felt earned. I placed the phone on the counter and made breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast, fresh coffee. Steam rose in gentle curls, and for once, the smell of morning did not feel rushed or tainted by obligation. Sitting alone at my small table, fork in hand, I realized something sharp but liberating. I had spent years disappearing so they could remain comfortable, shrinking my needs, minimizing my exhaustion, quieting my voice, disguising resentment as loyalty. They trained me to fade, and now they were shocked I was gone. Halfway through my meal, another buzz, a final voicemail preview. Mom, we need you. Stop this. Come back. You're going to regret this. That last line used to terrify me. The threat of regret is a powerful leash, but now it sounded hollow, almost small. Because regret only exists when you believe you lost something. And I had not lost anything. I had let go. I whispered into the quiet room, not for them, but for me. No, you needed me. And you trained me to disappear to survive. Now I am disappearing for real. I finished my breakfast, slowly savoring each bite like a declaration. Every quiet moment of peace tasted like defiance. Outside, people carried casseroles into cars bundled in coats, heading toward noise and tradition. Inside, I sat with sunlight on my face and felt something new settle in my bones. I was not missing a holiday. I was reclaiming a life. Sunday noon arrived with a pale winter sun that looked tired even before it climbed the sky, and I drove to my parents' house not in shame or fear or obligation, but in a steady, measured calm, the kind you feel when the hardest part is already behind you, and all that remains is truth. The neighborhood looked exactly the same as always. Manicured lawns, wreaths on doors, flags fluttering quietly in the cold, but something in me felt profoundly different, grounded firm, untouchable. I parked in the driveway, binder bag in hand, and breathed in cold air until it steadied the last of my nerves. I had brought 2 binders thick with printed receipts, login screenshots, payment histories, and annotated statements. The physical weight of them made my arm feel powerful, not burdened. Inside the house was dim, a cold draft drifting through the living room like the walls themselves shivered. The heat clearly still off. The room smelled faintly of leftover turkey and something sour resentment mixed with wilting flowers. My parents sat on the sofa wrapped in blankets, faces drawn tight. My mother's expression flickered between indignation and desperation, eyes glossy, but not with sadness, more like panic in a gilded frame. My father's jaw was clenched, the remote on the coffee table useless without Wi-Fi, his pride cracking like thawing ice. They did not stand. I did not sit. I placed both binders on the coffee table with the precision of someone presenting evidence in a deposition. The thud echoed. My mother flinched. Before either could speak, footsteps shifted behind me, and I noticed the door from the dining room open. 2 neighbors stood there, Mr. and Mrs. Halverson, longtime church friends who lived 2 houses down. I recognized them immediately from years of Sundays and holiday sermons. Their presence was not an accident. My mother had likely called them for support, expecting sympathy validation, maybe a performance of worry. They hovered uncertainly, coats still on, clutching a casserole dish, clearly invited as witnesses to a scene my mother thought she would control. Fate had other plans. My mother opened her mouth first. "Avery, this has gone far enough. You embarrassed us on Thanksgiving. Do you realize Pastor saw me crying after church? You owe us an explanation." The word "owe" scraped through the room like metal on glass. I remained still. I opened the first binder. Spreadsheets color-coded. Bank statements. Payment breakdowns. I spoke evenly. "This is a record of every bill I paid for the last 10 years. Mortgage, utilities, medical, cell plan, subscriptions, emergency help." I did not raise my voice. I did not rush. Each word landed like a stamp. My father shifted uncomfortably. "We appreciate your help, but you didn't have to be dramatic about—" I held up a hand. Quiet. Control. "Let's stay factual." I flipped pages. "Here is where you asked me to open the credit card at 19. Here is the date you asked me to cover the mortgage. Here is where I covered utilities for 17 consecutive months. Here is where the family phone plan expanded to 5 lines. Here is Blake's tablet I paid for. Here is his smartwatch." My mother's cheeks reddened, her lips tightening as though she was fighting the urge to interrupt. I slid printed screenshots across the table, their names, timestamps, confirmation numbers. My father blinked rapidly, as if each piece of paper stripped another layer of denial. Then I opened the second binder. This one was labeled in thick pen evidence. Audit logs, IP traces, device data usage, purchase receipts. I clicked my laptop awake and mirrored the screen to their television with a small HDMI cable. I brought intentionally, it felt symbolic, taking over their screen, the same screen I had helped pay for once. "I want to make sure there is no confusion," I said softly. Softness can be sharper than steel when chosen intentionally. I opened the phone portal record. This is Blake's data log from the last 90 days. During business hours, he used nearly 100 gigabytes from my account, mostly at a luxury gym and co-working lounge. My mother's mouth opened to protest, but I continued. Click. Email with order confirmation under my account, welding equipment shipped to their address. Click. Screenshot forged digital signature used for a financial authorization months ago. My father leaned forward, complexion draining, recognition dawning. He knew that signature. Or rather, he knew it was not mine. "Avery," he started, voice shaking under shame and reflexive defense, but before he could shape a sentence, heavy footsteps sounded from the hallway. Blake stormed in, jaw set, irritation radiating like cheap cologne. "What is going on? Why is—" He froze when he saw the binder pages spread across the coffee table, the screen showing his login activity. Arrogance buckled. His face paled. "You're insane!" he snapped immediately. Voice too loud, too forced. "You're blowing things out of proportion. We're family." The word family sounded like a plea wearing a threat. I turned toward him calm. Family doesn't forge signatures. A visible shudder rippled through him. Mrs. Halverson gasped softly behind me. Realization dawned in her eyes like morning sun piercing stained glass. She whispered almost involuntarily, "My God, they used her." The room shifted, not physically but morally, like the floor under them cracked, exposing the foundation. My mother sputtered, "This is private, you had no right." I met her gaze. 10 years of secrecy was private. Accountability is not. My father whispered something like a prayer, but it sounded more like collapse than faith. I lifted my pen and tapped the binder once. "I am not here for apology. I am here for clarity. You did not lose support. You lost supply. I was not your daughter. I was your financial infrastructure." A stunned silence followed. Air thick. Walls listening. Blake exhaled in disbelief, voice cracking at the edges. "So what, you think you're better than us?" There it was again. Better. The wound they never healed because they never tried. I picked up my laptop, closed it gently, then looked each of them in the eye. "I don't think I'm better. I think I'm done." My mother's face hardened, pride rising like armor. "You will come back. You always do." I smiled, but it wasn't kindness. It was release. Not anymore. The room did not break. Their illusion did. And in that moment, the air inside the house felt too small for truth, while the cold outside felt like freedom waiting. I gathered both binders, tucked them under my arm, and walked toward the door. As I reached the threshold, I heard my father's voice, softer than I had heard it in years, trembling like a child lost in his own making. "What are we supposed to do now?" I paused only long enough to answer with the simplest truth. "What everyone does when the bill comes due. You figure it out." Then I stepped outside into the winter light, the cold air clean against my skin, each breath like reclaiming ground that was mine all along. 2 days passed after the confrontation, and the world did not collapse like they always implied it would if I ever stopped carrying it. My apartment stayed warm. My lights stayed on. My life stayed mine. I went to work, joined meetings, answered emails, and walked to a nearby cafe for lunch, feeling a strange lightness in my shoulders, like I had been unknowingly wearing weighted armor my entire life and finally shrugged it off. Freedom does not always roar. Sometimes it hums quietly in your bloodstream. That afternoon, my building's front desk called. Their tone held that polite, strained courtesy downtown concierge staff use when something uncomfortable arrives wearing entitlement. "Ms. Carter, your family is here." I closed my laptop without a sigh or a spike of panic. My pulse stayed steady. If anything, I felt a stillness deepen. They could not let the collapse stay private. They never could. I took the elevator down. When the doors opened, I saw them immediately. My parents stood near the lobby fireplace, my mother in a pressed coat that looked like she dressed for pity. My father clutching a folder like paperwork could explain what pride could not. Blake was not physically there, but his absence felt like a choice, not shame. He never showed up unless he stood to gain something. My mother's face softened the moment she saw me, rehearsed sorrow sliding over her expression like a veil. "Avery," she breathed, voice trembling in that same choir-sweet pitch she used when she wanted forgiveness without accountability. "We didn't realize you'd take it that far." I tilted my head, slightly studying her. So many words in that sentence, but not one resembling responsibility. "That far," she said as if I had escalated, not simply stopped participating. My father stepped forward, clearing his throat. "We admit we mishandled things. But this has been hard. The house is freezing. Your mother hasn't slept." I stayed silent. I had given them a decade of language. Silence was my new currency. My mother rushed to fill it. "We just need your help until your father gets stable again." There it was. The real request. Not reconciliation, not healing. A return to function. Get stable. As if his life had been balanced on my paycheck by design instead of convenience. "We can work this out," she added, her eyes widening in a performance she probably believed. "You always come back when you calm down." That line might have broken me once. Now it felt almost laughable. Calm down is a phrase designed to make women question their clarity. I was not angry. I was sovereign. My father exhaled heavily. "We're family, Avery. We take care of each other." I did, I said, for years. My voice did not shake. It did not harden. It was simply factual, like reading a finance report line item aloud. My mother's lips tightened. That softness cracked. "So that's it? You're just walking away after everything we did for you." There it was, the debt speech returning like clockwork. Not what she did for me, what she believed she owned. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at it. A message from Blake. I opened it without rush. "Family shouldn't be transactional," he wrote. I almost smiled, not out of humor, but recognition. Gaslighting has a particular rhythm. People who have benefited from your labor love to moralize the moment the invoice arrives. I typed back one simple sentence. "You made it transactional." I simply closed the account. I put my phone away before he could reply. My mother stepped closer, lowering her voice like this was a negotiation and not a conclusion. "Listen," she murmured. "We don't have to tell anyone about Saturday. We can move forward, but you need to fix the utilities first. Fix, not discuss. not heal. Fix, restore the comfort, restore the illusion. Maintenance disguised as love, a lifetime disguised as obligation. My father's voice cracked. Avery, we're cold. I met his gaze, and for the first time I did not see authority or guilt or duty. I saw an adult standing before natural consequences. Then call the utility company, I said. Like adults do. His jaw tightened. The veneer of humility thinned. You're being cruel. That word floated in the air. Cruel. Because boundaries feel cruel to those who benefited from your lack of them. Before I could respond, the lobby security guard began walking over. He gave me a questioning look, polite but ready to intervene. I nodded slightly. He turned to my parents. I'm going to need you folks to step outside if you're not visiting a resident. My mother's voice rose brittle. She is our resident. She belongs with us. Belongs. Possession disguised as family. I shook my head once. I don't, I said quietly. Not anymore. The guard gestured toward the door, still courteous. My parents hesitated. Pride battled confusion, battled indignation. They seemed smaller in that moment, not humiliated by me, but revealed by their own expectations. My mother tried one last time, voice trembling. Avery, please. We need you. That sentence used to hold power. Now it held confirmation. I answered gently, almost tenderly, because finality does not need sharp edges to cut clean. Needing me was never love. They froze. My father made a sound between a scoff and a breath he couldn't finish. Security politely led them toward the exit. My mother looked back once, eyes wide, not with grief, but disbelief that the rules she relied on no longer applied. I stood still until the doors closed behind them, until the cold air rushed in as they stepped outside, until their figures blurred in the reflections of city glass. Only then did I turn away, the lobby warm again, the quiet suddenly vast. You made it transactional. I simply closed the account. Those words echoed in my chest like a clean cord, steady and right. I did not look back. I did not collapse. I did not question. I simply walked back to the elevator, each step light grounded earned. The doors opened. I stepped inside. The future waited upstairs, warm in mine. Consequences do not always arrive dramatically. Sometimes they slip in quietly, like morning frost spreading across a window, delicate but undeniable. Within a week I heard the fallout, not because I sought it, but because consequences have a way of traveling back to the source, especially when truth was delayed too long. The first ripple was the mortgage. My mother left a voicemail, her voice strained and clipped. They charged a late fee. Can you believe that? After all these years, we've been loyal customers. I listened to it while stirring oatmeal, the sunlight warm in my kitchen. Loyalty, I thought, is measured differently by institutions than by families. One deals in clear terms, the other in emotional debt. A day later, another message. They're requiring a deposit now for the utilities. Hundreds of dollars. Outrageous. Outrage is often the first reaction when someone is forced to face the very structure they once avoided by leaning on you. It is easier to call a system unfair than admit you never learned how to manage it. I deleted the voicemail and poured more tea. Warmth is easier to hold when it belongs to you. Then came Blake. His message arrived in the form of a text so dramatic it bordered on theatrical. I lost a client. They confronted me about the hotspot log, said it's unprofessional, I could sue you. I stared at the screen, a small, bewildered laugh escaping me. Sue me, for no longer funding his convenience, for exposure he created. I didn't respond, but hours later, a friend forwarded a post from one of his acquaintances, someone in his networking circle. If you're running a startup on someone else's dime, and data, is it really hustle or just freeloading with branding? The comments were unkind and for once not directed at me. Illusions crumble most loudly when they hit the ground. My mother suffered her own unraveling. The church committee she adored began hearing whispers not from me, but from observation. People notice when someone's world shifts, when your phone stops working, when your heat is off, when your complaints are too loud to hide behind scripture and casseroles. A woman from the choir, someone who had always smiled politely but watched carefully, called her out during a casual fellowship. Didn't Avery help you with bills for years? Why speak like she abandoned you when she carried you? Church politics are subtle knives, disguised in kindness but sharp in consequence. My mother stepped down from her role temporarily for emotional reasons, but everyone knew. Pride is brittle when built on borrowed stability. And then there was my father, the man who once puffed his chest while saying I handle things sat hunched behind a laptop learning online banking from tutorial videos. A relative posted a photo of him at the kitchen table, glasses perched low, fingers tapping awkwardly. The caption tried to make it light, Dad learning tech, but his expression gave away something more fragile: fear, humility, the unsettling recognition that self-sufficiency is not optional. Growth rarely feels graceful. Meanwhile, a Thanksgiving photo resurfaced online. My mother smiling at the head of the table 3 days before the meltdown. Caption blessed. Family is everything. Comments began appearing beneath it. Where is Avery? Didn't she always help? Heard she's the reason they were doing well. Funny how some praise God while living off someone else. It spread quietly, not viral, but enough to stain the edges of the curated image. Reputation cracks when truth leaks, even drop by drop. Years of performance undone by silence. Not my words, just absence. That's the thing about silence when you're finally quiet after a lifetime of explaining. People notice the noise left behind wasn't yours, it was theirs. And in the quiet, they hear themselves. The house stayed cold, not because I caused winter, but because they never planned for it. The bills piled, not because I withheld support, but because they confused dependence with love. Blake scrambled, not because I sabotaged him, but because he mistook borrowed convenience for competence. I lived my routine. Work, walk home, brew tea, water plants, breathe. Peace arrived not in joy, but in equilibrium, like I finally stood on ground that did not move under the weight of someone else's expectations. I did not celebrate their struggles. Pain was never the goal. Accountability was. And accountability is not vengeance, it's math. Cause, effect, choice, result. One evening, I sat on my balcony wrapped in a blanket, watching city lights shimmer like small promises, and a sentence drifted through my mind with the clarity of a ledger closing. Actions have consequences. Silence just lets everyone hear them clearer. I inhaled cold air and exhaled warmth, not because I wished them harm, but because for the first time in a decade, my breath felt like it belonged entirely to me. I did not destroy anything. I simply stopped holding it up. And the difference between collapse and release is who was doing the carrying all along. A week after everything settled into its new shape, I woke before dawn to a quiet that felt earned rather than imposed. I wrapped a scarf around my neck and stepped outside into crisp air that kissed my cheeks awake. Seattle was still wiping sleep from its windows when I reached the ferry terminal. I bought a ticket to Bainbridge Island, no plan beyond movement, no company beyond myself. The ferry horn sounded low and steady, the kind of sound that feels like permission. I walked to the upper deck and leaned against the rail. The wind was sharp, clean, honest. I held a steaming cup of coffee between my hands, warmth seeping slowly into my fingers. As the ferry pulled away, the city skyline thinned into distance, towers shrinking, noise dissolving into open water. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't running toward obligation or away from guilt. I was moving simply because I could. The water below shimmered steel gray, rippling under morning light. Breath clouded in front of me and drifted away like old versions of myself, like every apology I gave that was really a plea to be seen. Like every quiet, yes, I whispered under the weight of expectation. On the island, I wandered tree-lined streets, breathing pine and salt, and something that felt suspiciously like freedom. I found a small cafe tucked behind a bookstore and ordered another coffee, then sat at a corner table where a tiny vase held a single stem of eucalyptus. Simple, intentional, no performance. I took out my journal and wrote, not lists, not budgets, not tasks, just truth. I wrote about boundaries and softness, about the difference between carrying someone and being carried, about the strange loneliness of outgrowing people and the quiet pride of surviving anyway. Later that afternoon, I attended my therapy appointment via video call sitting on a park bench under yellowing leaves. My therapist listened the way she always did, with presence, not pity. "How do you feel?" she asked. I thought about the frantic calls, the silence after the cold house that was no longer mine to warm. And I answered honestly. "Light," I said. "Tired. But light." She nodded. "Sometimes peace arrives disguised as emptiness. But emptiness is just space waiting to be filled with better things." I stared at the trees, their branches bare but reaching. "I used to think peace was quiet," I said. "Now I think peace is clean." "Clean," she repeated. I nodded. "Clear edges, no blurred lines, no pretending." She smiled. "That's a strong kind of peace." When the call ended, I walked into a small plant shop next door. It smelled like soil and green life and second chances. I picked up a tiny pothos leaves, glossy and bright, trailing just enough to show potential. A tag stuck in the soil read, "Thrives when not overwatered." I almost laughed. Too much care can drown things. I brought it to the counter. "It's a hardy one," the cashier said. "Grows fast once it feels safe." I carried it out like something sacred. On the ferry ride back, I sat indoors by the window plant on my lap, watching gulls trace arcs above the water. The boat hummed steady and sure, carrying me home without asking me to sacrifice anything in return. I thought of next year, Thanksgiving, my table, my rules. Maybe I would cook something simple. Maybe I would invite a friend who also understood complicated families. Maybe I would go hiking instead, let the world be my family that day. The details didn't matter yet. What mattered was the freedom to choose. For so long, holidays felt like emotional performance reviews. Now they were possibilities. As the city reappeared on the horizon, lights twinkling like softened stars, I whispered a promise to myself. Next Thanksgiving, I will sit at a table built from peace, not guilt. The ferry docked. I stepped off plant, cradled in my arms like a quiet declaration. Walking back through the city wind, brushing my hair, I didn't feel alone. I felt accompanied by every moment I had chosen myself. Back home, I placed the pothos on my kitchen counter near the window where light spilled in every morning. I watered it lightly, just enough. Then I leaned against the counter and let silence settle around me, not heavy, not waiting, not expectant, just present. My apartment glowed, warm walls holding memories. I chose not ones that pressed into me. I traced the rim of my mug, inhaled chamomile, and felt something expand inside my chest. Not joy exactly, not relief, something steadier, sovereignty. Peace isn't quiet, it's clean. And I was finally living in a life that had room for cleanliness, for clarity, for truth. The plant's leaves rustled slightly in the heat, rising through the vent alive and reaching just like me. Sometimes endings don't feel like fireworks or battles or slammed doors. Sometimes they feel like a breath you didn't realize you'd been holding for years, finally leaving your body gentle and complete. After everything, my life didn't explode. It didn't collapse. It simply settled into place piece by piece, like a puzzle I had been assembling without the picture on the box, and suddenly realizing the image wasn't chaos, it was me. I started waking up without dread. That was the first transformation. There is a kind of silence that used to terrify me because I confused silence with abandonment. But true silence, the kind that's chosen, the kind that's clean, became a sanctuary. I filled my mornings with small rituals instead of obligations, stretching in the sunlight, letting the kettle sing, watching my new plant unfurl tiny new leaves just because it finally had space to grow. Healing doesn't announce itself. It arrives in ordinary moments, like buying groceries only for yourself, like cooking dinner without mentally calculating who else might need something too, like walking through your apartment knowing every bill is yours, and so is every peaceful corner. Sometimes people ask what freedom feels like. I used to think it would feel loud, triumphant, like a victory parade. But for me, freedom felt like finally hearing my own heartbeat. Steady, confident, enough. And yes, part of me grieved. Not for who they were, but for who I had to become to survive them. For the girl who believed love meant proving your worth. For the daughter who mistook sacrifice for connection. for the woman who carried everyone else until she nearly collapsed under the weight. I didn't bury that version of me. I honored her. She kept me alive long enough to find a different way. But now I protect myself the way she protected everyone else, and I don't apologize for it. Because here is the truth. I want you to take with you the one I wish someone whispered to me years earlier. You don't fail a family by refusing to be used. You don't become selfish by saying no. You don't cause harm by protecting your peace. Not everyone deserves a front row seat to the life you fought to build. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors. And sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is close one gently and walk toward the life you were meant to have. If you are watching this and you know what it feels like to give until you were empty, if you learned to measure your worth by how much you could carry, if you ever sat alone wondering whether choosing yourself made you a bad person, I hope this story reminded you of something you may have forgotten. You are allowed to choose peace. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to keep your heart and your resources for people who would never weaponize your love. And you are not alone. There are so many of us who survived in silence, believing we had to earn a seat at a table that was already ours. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is build your own table, even if you set the first place for one. One day, someone who values you not what you can provide will sit beside you. Until then, solitude is not a punishment. It is a homecoming. If you've ever been punished for being generous, tell me where you're watching from. And if you ever had to walk away from family to save yourself, you didn't abandon them. You freed yourself. And I'm proud of you for choosing light, even when the world tried to convince you darkness was duty. Please subscribe. We tell stories for those who learned to survive in silence. Your voice matters here. Your healing matters here. And you exactly as you are without carrying anyone else are enough.